Just record it. Awesome. So tonight we are looking at shifting the lens, not fixing, because we don't fix when we're trying to help people with stuff, but reframing. Seeing what usually we end up in a situation where we tell ourselves something about a situation, and because that's our first assessment of it, and our brains are lazy, we go, over time, that must be the truth. I have to accept that's how it is. When we reframe, we see the situation from a different angle. And quite often we actually see the real truth behind it, because quite often that first assessment, that first conclusion about a situation or something, isn't actually where the truth lies. It's a really quick and really clean way to change a stuck state of mind. It kind of softens resistance. So if people are a bit reluctant to do something, a bit reluctant to change something, it can soften that resistance. And it opens doors, because if you're stuck in, like we said before, if you're stuck within one framework of how you think everything is, you only see that. So if you've exhausted all the possibilities of how you think you can deal with it, then you're a bit like, but um, if you can reframe and see it from a different perspective or a different take on the situation, it then gives you choice. And if we make the choice seem better than the old choice, then we're more likely to go with it as well. So a reframe is literally a way of changing the meaning of something without changing the facts. So it's not denial. It's not just being positive, because with everyone in the world, you can be really positive but still really stuck. It's about discovering that what seemed like a block, that seemed like a wall, might, from a different angle, just be another door that you can try stepping through. So we're going to look at 4 tools to help reframing. And the first one, tool number one. If I was professional, I'd have a big flashy up thing that went bing, bing, bing. Tool number one. Uh, intention reframe.
You are a
In
professional.
Oh yeah. um, intention reframe, or reframing the intention. Um, this builds on the idea that behind every behavior, and in behavior that can mean like physical behavior to mental behavior. If there's a regular way of thinking, it's a behavioral way of thinking. Um, every behavior, even, and you can take this to an extreme, but even the unhelpful ones serve a positive intent at some level. And you see this is tested most when you look at criminals and people that do what they do. So, you might get somebody who's gone on a spree of robbing people at knife point, um, take their mobile phones, any cash they've got, that kind of thing, which outwardly we would all go, well, it's a terrible thing to be doing. Absolutely terrible thing to be doing. Why? Yeah, that's not a good thing. And outwardly, it doesn't seem it. But then if you were to get into that person's backstory and into that person's life more, you may find out that they're absolutely at their wits' end and desperate, maybe with a couple of children and a partner who may be sick, and they have been pushed and pushed and pushed to the point where they literally, that behavior is, to them, the only thing they can do that brings in money and helps keep a roof over their head. Doesn't mean it's a correct action. We're not condoning the behavior, but the positive intent behind is it, I've got to survive and support my family. That, as the intent, the motivating thought behind the action, is actually a positive thought. It's a positive intention. I'm doing this because it's the only way I can see to keep a roof over my head and feed my family is a positive reason for doing it. It's just the behavior, the thing they're doing is not um, a positive, you know. So just because the intent is positive doesn't mean how it manifests necessarily is. But reframing intention means we separate the action from the reason behind it. Just like I did there in that example. You know, the action is, well, they're robbing people. The intent is, it's the only thing I can think that I've got left that can actually bring food to the table. Doesn't, like say, separate the action out. That's not, the action is not a positive action in the long term, but the reason behind it is positive. So a few more examples, probably less out there and kind of challenging. Procrastination. So you might get somebody that procrastinates a lot, puts off doing it, just kind of, you know, there's a wonderful way of procrastinating where you make yourself busy doing other things that justify the fact that I'm not just putting things off, I'm getting things done. Still procrastinating, still putting off the thing that needs doing. Um, so procrastination, we could go, oh, I just keep putting things off. You know, that's the action. The putting off is the action. So if we step behind that, what could be the intent? Well, actually, the procrastination doesn't help, but maybe it's that person's system trying to avoid failure. Suddenly, if there's something in their back where in past where failing has been made to be a terrible and awful thing and you must not fail, and maybe it had consequences as a child if you failed, procrastination is a great way then of not ever failing because you put off the thing you know needs to be done to avoid failing at it. Or maybe, maybe somebody's procrastinating to protect themselves from burnout. So again, they're putting things off that aren't getting done. Why aren't you getting this work done? A boss turns around. Why aren't you getting this, and this done? Why are you behind in your work? Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm just procrastinating at the moment. I really apologize. Blah, blah, blah. So the procrastination isn't necessarily a wanted behavior. But actually, if on the inner level, the body is kind of like, you need a break. You really need to slow down and take some time out. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. That's a really good intention. That's like, um, you know, that's looking out for you. That's well-being. Um, just the way it's manifesting isn't necessarily the best way. You get this a lot with habits and things like that, where people kind of pick at hair and things like that. The behavior isn't something they want, but when you get behind it, there's a good intention, there's a good reason for why that behavior's there. Always pleasing others is a classic. You know, I'm always pleasing others, always put other people before myself. I think people are worth more than me. I've got to make sure everybody's happy. It might not be much, it might not be helping much now with life. It might mean that you're missing out because you're always making sure everyone else is okay, and by the time it comes to you, you're too tired. But maybe as a child, that person had to put others first just as a way to survive and get through childhood. Maybe they had to. In which case, the intention is if I make other people happy, I will be okay. So the intention's good. The way it manifests now is not necessarily good or something we would agree with. So what we're going to jump into breakout rooms. Though I probably don't actually need to with today, unless I don't know. Do you want to jump into a breakout room, or are you happy just
Not when it's the two of us.
yeah,
No
just
point.
just do the jump? Okay, let's just do that. Okay, then. So I'll take us through. we'll muck in and do this together. So not a breakout room, but for the next few minutes, we'll take it in turns. Someone drops in either a habit or a behavior that they feel is unhelpful. It might be one of your own, or you might thinking, oh, I don't want to share much of me tonight. In which case, make one up. Make one up. Think of something we've seen. We've all got friends who do certain things, and we go, "Oh, it really doesn't help them," um, or just make something up. So one person will share a habit. We'll go round. We'll all have a go. Um, a habit or behavior that feels unhelpful, and then the rest of us will offer a reframe. And so, you know, what might the positive intention behind that be? What's the good intention behind that? What's that? What is it that's doing for you? Yeah. And then we'll switch round, and that's it. We'll just literally share a behavior or a habit. What might the positive intention behind that be? You can literally just ask, what might that be? See what the person comes up with, or offer something. But usually, if we're working just from the person's perspective, then we'll just ask them, what might that positive intention behind that be? What's that? What's giving you? How does that help you? Because in some way it will be. So let's see. Anyone have something they want to kick off with, or I'll pause the recording for this bit. Now we're recording. Um, so tool number two is the context reframe. So, and this is literally, I mean, those of us that are here will know exactly what I'm talking about. The rest of you will have to just get the gist. The same behavior or way of thinking, as we've just explored, can be useful or problematic depending on the context. So worry can be problematic if it's getting us down, but if that worry is reframed as, say, care, suddenly, well, there's nothing to get you down about caring. If you care, that means you're coming from a good place, right? So therefore, we change the context. A context reframe helps someone realize that that feeling isn't either, it's not wrong. That behavior isn't necessarily wrong. It's just maybe not in the right place. Or even the way I'm thinking about it isn't quite the right angle. And the truth behind it is actually it means something else. And once you know that it means that something else, you can feel better about yourself. So being stubborn isn't necessarily a bad thing if it's how you protect what matters. Yeah. Think of all the civil rights people in the world. If they'd have gone, I don't agree with the way you're treating these people, and someone had gone, shut up, or else I'm going to make life difficult for you. And they went, oh, okay. It wouldn't work, would it? It's their stubbornness that actually, no, this matters to me, so I'm going to protect it. So what we've done is we've changed the context. We've reframed how we're looking at that stubbornness and what it does. So by asking that first question, you can use that then to reframe interrupting. Oh, I always find myself interrupting. Well, I mean, interrupting. I mean, that's assertiveness in a high stake meeting. We've taken something that someone's gone, oh, it's really bad, I interrupt, and gone, well, actually, if you're in an important meeting, if you're in a, I mean, bring those two together, stubborn and interrupting, means you're going to hold on and protect what matters, and you will interrupt to get your point over if you're in that kind of level of discussion. So take the behavior and change the context so it goes from being a problem to being useful. One of the classic ones, and I know I've shared this in other contexts, is where someone says, I keep procrastinating. as though it's a bad thing. Because actually, yeah, if it means you're not getting stuff done, it can be. But I keep procrastinating. Wonderful. I bet you're really good at that. Yeah. No one ever expects you to say that. Um, so what I want you to do from now on is, as you're really good at putting things off, can you procrastinate your procrastination? Which means you're then putting off putting things off, which means you get them done. Yeah. So you reframe that thing. You make the procrastination into a good thing because it's actually a tool that can help you put off putting things off. And if you put things off, put off putting, it's not even easy to say. If you put off putting things off, suddenly you're actually doing them. Yeah. So I'll pause this again. Bing. Next one ties in a little bit with some of the stuff we've done in the last couple of weeks, which is the humor and absurd reframes. Um, so sometimes especially if it's a rigid belief that's holding someone stuck in a certain behavior. I mean, again, a rigid belief makes it sound like a terrible thing. It might not be the world's worst behavior. It could be a behavior that we ourselves go, wish I was a bit more like that. I'd get things done. Uh, but it's something that's causing a problem for that person. So, but one of the greatest ways one of the best ways of breaking a rigid belief is just to make it ridiculous. Make it ridiculous. So you reframe using exaggeration, parody, or some sort of comic perspective just to loosen. Basically, and I think it's on one of the Bandler class of a master things where he's got, and it's brilliant. In fact, it is. He's got a chap, and I want you to think of an issue, um, and something that's been like a real stress for you recently, or something. And the guy's got something. I don't think we ever hear what it is. And so he hypnotizes him, and he's like, he does the. Oh yeah, every time I touch my finger to your knee and make this noise, bzz, you're just going to start laughing and laughing even more, and laughing, and so much that you just can't stop laughing, and you just and so this guy, whilst he's talking to the audience and everything, just keeps chuckling away to himself, which in itself is quite amusing. And every now and again, he just reaches over and buzzes his knee, and the guy's like bursts out laughing again. And he gets him to the point where he's just been laughing and laughing and laughing. Of course, then you're releasing endorphins. You're starting to feel good, and he gets him laughing even more. And he said, "Now try and think of that situation." And he's like, "I can't." He's like, "Well, it's ridiculous. It's not actually really that serious." It's like, so it's not that serious. This was the thing that was really getting you down. It's not that serious, and that's literally because he's invoked laughter in the guy, and he's reframed his state of mind. So rather than looking at it from the worry, stress about the situation perspective, he's now looking at it from the the comic, laughing, feel good, that's nonsense kind of perspective, and it changes the grip of the emotion. It shifts the feeling behind it. So an example of this might be, I'm really terrible at finishing things. So you might say, wow, that is an amazing lifelong commitment to creative incompleteness. Or you might say, someone goes, I'm always late. So you might go, what? Time actually bends for you? You're a living legend. Um, so you take a critical statement, an I statement, I am this, I'm that, I'm always this, I'm always that, and you reframe it with something that makes it sound comical, ridiculous, over the top, or humorous. So, tool to look at. Um, the final one is a metaphorical reframe. Metaphors, because they're kind of story-esque, bypass resistance. So we're talking like a symbolic reframe, which goes, resistance usually comes from a place of logic, and symbolic reframes and metaphors can get beyond that place of of um of that resistance, that logic. So an example might be, my anxiety is just really getting me down. Well, you know what? Your anxiety it's not a flaw. It's a smoke alarm that just needs recalibration. Or, you know, oh, messed up. I've completely failed. Maybe this isn't failure. Maybe it's winter. So let's go. Let me pause ready up the end a bit. So that has been the Reframing Reality Reframe Lab night. That's what I called it. I meant to tell you that's what I was calling it beforehand. Um, it's a bit of a mouthful actually, so probably no need to. But every story we carry has a frame. Yeah. Every story about us has a frame, a framework that it sits within, and every frame has an edge. Tonight, we stretch those edges, and we've learned to see intent in unlikely places. Remember, every behavior, and that includes ways of thinking about things, has behind it a good intention. Shift behaviors by shifting context. Use humor as medicine. So if you, like I say, if you can get somebody to laugh and look at that same situation from a place where they're laughing, you'll shift how they feel about it. Once you shift how they feel about it, they're not stuck anymore. And speaking in symbols. Speaking, we've mentioned kind of doing more spiritual stuff sometimes with I meditate, but actually, every time we're looking at metaphor, every time we're looking at symbol, every time we're looking at the thought processes that direct us within to explore our inner world, our inner reality, that really is spiritual work. I remember being at the careers fair up at the school a couple of years back. Would have been a couple of years back. New vicar had just arrived up the road, and I'd spoken to him once, and I was the only person in the room he recognised. So he gravitated and hovered around me for most of the session. And at one point, some young lad, I think I've shared this before. There's some young lads came up and said, "Can you hypnotise my mate?" And I was like, "Why? What for?" Expecting them to go, "Oh, I want him to be like a monkey or something," uh, and and they turned around and said to make better life choices, which wasn't what I expected. That was a pattern interrupt on their behalf, actually, thinking about it. Um, so then this lad comes up and says, "Your mates say you need to make better life choices." And he's like, "Yeah, just I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what to do." I was like, "So if you did know, what would that be?" He said, "Well, I like my bikes." So we've gone already. We're future paced, and we're assuming he knows in the future what he wants to be. So if you did, what would you be doing? I like my bikes. Okay, so you like your bikes. And what is it? So I like fixing them and repairing them. Okay, so in the future you'd like to be repairing bikes, right? And he's like, yes. And so where would you do that? And he was like, Canada. So okay, so just imagining now that you're in Canada, fixing bikes. How's that feel? It's not really good. I said, so even you don't know what you want to do now, but actually what you'd like to do, say starting tomorrow, is be fixing bikes and eventually doing it in Canada. I said, how do you make that happen then? And he's like, I need to learn how to. So how do you do that? He's like, well, my dad fixes bikes. You're like, okay, so your dad fixes bikes. Okay. Uh, so I guess you could ask him. I mean, how would that be? Yeah, I could ask him. So, and if you started helping, then, and we went through this process. It was only five, 5 minute chat, really, 5, 10 minutes tops. Uh, all of which was about directing him to explore his inner world, what he wanted, what was speaking to him, the images that popped up, the symbols. Sometimes it was direct, sometimes it's more of a feeling, to the point where at the end of it, it's like, I know what I want to do. And then a year later, he came back to me and said, do you remember me? We talked about bikes. And I was like, I do actually. And he's like, I've been working with my dad ever since, doing them up. He said, I can pretty well strip and rebuild now. So Chris wasn't there for when he came back, but Chris was there when that's the vicar was there when I was going through this process with him, reframing, future pacing, all the stuff we've been looking at, to basically direct him in to explore his inner self because we're always drawn out of ourselves in the world. Um, And at the end of it, Chris said, "Oh, it's really nice to see you doing the kingdom work," by which he meant that inner spiritual work. So all this stuff we're looking at, if you want to frame it as spiritual, you can, because, you know, a guided meditation, anything that takes you inwards, even a conversation that directs you inwards, actually, if it's directing you inwards, so you're looking at yourself and your true self, is a spiritual process. Um, and I think, kind of digressing slightly, one of the biggest reframes for me was the reframe when you went, "There is nothing I do that isn't spiritual." Because as a spiritual being living in a world and a universe that definitely has a spiritual plane and element to it, that was created by a divine being, you can't not be part of it, something, and not be spiritual. You can do lots to distract yourself from your spirituality by TV, games, machines, so many ways that, yeah, people can distract themselves from it now. But actually, you can't not be spiritual. You've just got to remember that you are, and then live your life accordingly. And all these questions, all these different ways of speaking to other people, we can also direct towards ourselves and use for ourselves, as I know you've discovered along the way. And whether we choose to call it spiritual work or just self work, or, you know, working on me for a bit, it's the same thing. So we've learned to see that intent in unlikely places, shift behaviors by shifting context, humor medicine, speaking symbols, and that our soul understands. If you really want to work it more spiritually, use symbol, use metaphor, because that's when you start working at a deeper level. So let the world surprise you this week. When you hear an old script playing, something like, you know, "Oh, there I go again, always blah, 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 blah," stop and just ask yourself, what else could this mean?